few years later before they completed all of the gardens and everything else. So, we have kind of a special feeling for the Bahamians that, that had all this damage from the hurricane and everything now. Yeah, quite a group of them here to build the house. Actually, we've had many hurricanes come through South Florida as well that have caused damage to the house itself. But the house was actually built with walls about 1.5 feet thick, made out of poured and reinforced concrete. So this house is not going anywhere in any hurricane.
I remember when the hurricane comes, this place I want to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Shabby shelter.
Right?
Is Venetian Pool associated with Vizcaya?
Who?
Venetian Pool?
Not associated, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
But the style is
Okay.
the same. I mean, all of Coral Gables was
Right.
designed after this Spanish, style of architecture.
Okay.
So similar in style, and that was also started around the.
Because I noticed the same, the same fountain like you have out here in Venetian Pool, yeah.
So, the estate originally consisted of about 180 acres of land.
Wow.
Just south of the formal garden outside, there used to be a less formal garden area that had waterways for Mr. Deering's boats. He loved boats. He was a big yachtsman. And that was called the Lagoon Gardens. And then across the street, right across South Miami Avenue where you came in, Mr. Deering built a farm. He was a manufacturer of farm equipment, right? So he planted crops over there. He had cows and chickens and greenhouses and orange groves. And then they also built a small village there where they had housing for his staff. They had a garage for his cars. They had machine shops and carpenter shops. And, back in 1916, Miami was still a relatively small town. It had a population of only about 10,000. So it wasn't always easy for them to get all the goods and services that you needed for a large estate such as this. So that's why they built that farm village area across the street.
Is that where the overflow parking is?
Yes.
And the peacocks sometimes are over there?
Yes.
Okay. They chase each other around there. It's
Peacocks are
funny.
everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it used to be the Miami Museum of Science was there, and the planetarium was there, and then they moved that downtown. But yeah, they're actually planning to open that village area to our tours sometime in the future.
That'll be interesting.
Maybe the tours might even start out in the village, and then you come into the house here. So.
About that.
But anyway, so today there's only about 50 acres remaining out of the original. So that's a little bit about the history of Vizcaya.
Okay.
Have any questions yet at this point?
Here's my
Well, then let's start.
sacred water fountain. All right.
So the theme of our tour is that Vizcaya is the result of European architectural styles and designs that were brought here from Europe, but then they were changed. They were adapted to better fit here into this South Florida subtropical climate that we have, right? So help me out now. Take a look around this courtyard and tell me what do you see in this courtyard that the designer used to kind of draw your attention to the subtropical setting here in South Florida.
The open air.
Okay, it's open air, right? I mean, there's no ceiling above us, right?
The plants.
Okay, the plants are sorry?
I see pineapples up there.
Pineapples, sure, on the fountain. That's a 16th century Italian dolphin fountain. The dolphins down there. the plants are very subtropical. You would not have seen plants like that in this northern Italian villa.
Right.
The same with this open courtyard. This villa did not have an open courtyard. This was a Spanish element that was added to the house because they wanted to open up to the elements. Keep in mind, Mr. Deering lived here only in the winter months when the weather here is beautiful. Right now it's pretty hot to be outside. But, in the winter it's great, so that's why they added this open courtyard. And remember, the skylight above us was not here originally, so that was
So the 80s, right?
later.
80s?
In the 80s, yes. In the
Yeah.
80s, we closed that in. The same with the glass doors and windows you see on the east side and on the west side of the house. They were not here originally, so the beautiful breezes from the bay go right into the courtyard. So they wanted to take advantage of some tropical climate and change the design.
I gotta get some of that good water for it now.
In fact, that's why we closed in, why we added these skylights, so we could air condition the entire house, and that way it would help preserve the collection, protect it from the humidity, and make it successful for guests as well. Now, the floor is one more example of a South Florida change and adaptation. Of course, this floor is made out of coral rock, which is made of limestone, and a lot of these rocks are so you can even see into some of the imprints of some of the coral right in the stone. You would not have seen a floor like this in that northern Italian villa either.
Nope.
So you can see how these styles from Europe were brought here. They were adapted in winter and summer. One more interesting thing about the courtyard, back in 1994, the very first Summit of the Americas was held here in South Florida.
Wow.
That was a big meeting between all the presidents of almost every country in North, South, and Central America. And they set up a big square table right here in the middle of the courtyard. And all the presidents sat around this table, had a big meeting, and that meeting was hosted by our president at that time, Bill Clinton.
Oh. Interesting.
So let me, before we continue our tour inside, let me tell you a few policies that we have here that I have to inform you about. We ask that you don't touch anything inside the museum.
Right.
No food or drink is allowed inside the house. No flash photography inside the house. And also we ask that you watch your step as we're walking through, because there's a lot of uneven surfaces and some steps, and we don't want anyone to.
Can I leave my water bottle at the front?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna go take it up there. Gotta have it. Okay. Thank you. I get parched.
No, we're not gonna,
Okay.
we're not gonna kick you out if you take a sip of water.
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, these are Mr. Deering's, a couple of his yachting trophies. He was a big yachtsman, and they used to have these regattas out here on the bay, and so Mr. Deering won a couple of trophies for that.
Beautiful. Okay, Mr. Deering, you're a boatsman. Okay, that's why we don't want food and water. Okay.
Arrived here at the estate. There's 2 small bathrooms behind me there where guests could go and freshen up after their journey.
Okay, so
And
this is-
then they would generally be shown through that door into the reception room where they could meet with Mr. Deering. Now, what always strikes me about this room when we first come in here is that it doesn't feel like we're in the subtropics anymore, does it?
Nope.
Now, this room has a very antique feel, right? And that was by design. Mr. Chalfin wanted the house to feel and look like it had been here for centuries. So they chose architectural styles and designs that would give the house an illusion of age. So help me out again here. Look around this room and tell me what you see in this room that might give this room that illusion of age. Marble, yeah, sure, of course. Sorry? Okay, on the wall, sure. The murals on the wall. Actually, a lot of people think those are tapestries or maybe paintings, but it's actually wallpaper. And it was designed by a French master, Joseph Dufour, and they depict scenes from mythology,
Yeah. We're great.
which again gives it
We
that.
recognize a lot of that.
Yeah, sure. You see in the corner, you see the Roman columns, right? The marble columns with the lamps on top that were designed in the shape of candelabra. And by the way, Mr. Deering wanted all the modern technology to be used in the house, so they used electric lights in all of the lamps in the house, not candles.
Wow.
So you see the Roman columns, you see these are Grecian, actually, urns. They were modeled after 2 very famous garden vases that were made in Athens, Greece, back in the 1st century. The floor, of course, is marble. And look at the ceiling. The ceiling is a coffered ceiling that was designed by Paul Chalfin. Compare the ceiling and the floor. Do you see the symmetry
Yep.
between the floor and the ceiling? You see the same shapes and right? And if you stand on a circle in the floor and you look straight above your head, what do you see?
A circle.
Corresponding circle in the ceiling, right? So they wanted that symmetry between the floor and the ceiling.
Lots of symmetry.
So the design, the architectural style in this room is known as neoclassical, meaning that it's based on the classical Roman and Greek architectural styles. And they chose that so that Mr. Deering's guests, when they arrive, they would think of Mr. Deering as not only highly affluent, but also highly cultured gentleman as well.
Wonder Woman. It's okay. Versace. Pineapples everywhere. Okay, hold on. I've been looking these rooms. This is where they would come freshen up, like after a long drive to see him. This one's kind of spooky. I just wanted to get in here and see what's around that corner. Okay, here we go. I want to know what's behind that door. What was behind this door? Did he say what was behind that door? I don't know.
So this is the library.
Okay.
This is where Mr. Deering would meet with some of his business-related guests. You can see a painting of Mr. Deering there back in the corner. That was painted when he was about 44 years old, and it was done by a Swedish artist named Anders Zorn. And then behind me, you can see a mahogany bookcase that was designed for Vizcaya, and it does contain many of Mr. Deering's original collection of books.
That was gonna be my question.
The idiot is the
Love to
idiot
read.
in there.
He loved to read. And by the way, if you peek behind his door, you'll notice that they actually mounted false book fronts
The idiots.
on the
Right there.
door,
That's
so
what
that when
the
the
door
door is closed, it looks like it's part of the bookcase.
Oh, I never noticed.
So it was kind of like a secret little hidden door that he could go through to surprise his guests.
So these are real books, right?
Yes.
The idiots.
Yeah.
Oh my god. What a lot.
Did you get the back of the door?
Oh wow. Oh. I just said that. That's pretty cool. Okay.
So this is the reception room.
Oh wow.
This is where Mr. Deering would meet and socialize with his guests. Now this room, I think if you look around, you'll see that it's done in a very different architectural style from that entrance hall, right? And
Yeah.
that was common for architects to design different rooms in wealthy homes using different architectural styles. Tell me, what is it in this room that looks different from the entrance
All
hall?
the palm trees, like the.
The
Palm
chandelier?
trees, yes, yes.
Oh.
Okay, well, you see
Yeah.
a high ceiling in this room, right? You
chandelier,
see
right?
a lot of, on the walls, you see a lot of curves, don't you, in the
Uh-huh.
designs, right?
Oh yeah.
The same in the furniture, a lot of curves. Whereas that entrance hall was like straight lines, geometric
Oh,
shapes.
yeah.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
This room, the style in this room is known as French Rococo.
French replica.
And that was chosen, by Mr. Chalfin for this particular room. Actually, he used to refer to this room as the Marie Antoinette salon.
Ah.
because
Looks
of
very
the,
Marie
uh,
Antoinette.
French Rococo style. That
Uh-huh.
wall covering in this room with the palm trees on it there, by the way, is not wallpaper, but it's made of silk.
Oh.
And it did have to be replaced back in the 1980s, I believe, because the original silk had deteriorated from the high
Humidity?
humidity that we used to get
Yeah.
here before the house was air
Sucks.
conditioned. Now take a look at the ceiling in this room, and you'll see one of Mr. Deering's prized possessions. This is the first of 3 ceilings that we're going to see on this tour that were purchased in Europe and then were brought here and installed here in
Oh,
Vizcaya.
my word.
That ceiling actually came from a palazzo in Venice, Italy, Palazzo Rossi in Venice, Italy, and they actually had to break it apart into 13 separate pieces, pack it in crates, and then ship it over here, and they stored it in a warehouse, and then when they built the house, then they reassembled it here in this room.
Wow.
It's made of plaster, molded and painted plaster, and I think they did a pretty good job reassembling it because I can't tell
I
where,
can't tell.
where it was broken apart.
Wow.
Right. That's what they did with a lot of the things. When Mr. Deering was taking all those trips to Europe before the house was even designed, he bought a lot of things like this ceiling, and he bought statues, he bought furniture, he bought fountains, he bought tapestries, and all of that stuff was brought over here and stored in a warehouse. And so then when Mr. Kaufman was given the task to design the house, he had to design the house to fit all of these furnishings and objects that he already had purchased.
And what percentage of the furnishings at Vizcaya are original?
It's all original.
Oh, it is?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Everything you see here is original. After the estate was conveyed to the county by Mr. Deering's family, this was years after he passed away, they donated all of the furnishings and all of the art objects inside the home, they donated to the county. That chandelier that you see there also came from Venice, Italy, and it's made of wood painted with gold leaf and crystal. And originally the chandelier was designed to use candles. However, Mr. Deering had it wired when they brought it here to use the electric lights. And by the way, one interesting thing too, those around the outside of the chandelier, you see those sort of crystal
Yeah.
little vases or goblets there around the outside. Well, they used to be filled with perfume.
Oh,
And then the heat from the lamps would actually cause the perfume to release
Nice.
its fragrance into the room.
wow.
Clever.
So that was
Yeah.
sort of an early version of those Febreze plug
Yeah.
pressures.
Without all the chemicals. Wow.
So again, you can see here how these European architectural styles, in this case the French Rococo style, were brought here and adapted for use here in South Florida.
Cool. Oops. Oops, oops, oops.
Take a peek over there. I told you Mr. Deering loved technology.
Oh, yeah.
And he wanted to use all the modern technology, so he had the very first automatic telephone
Telephone.
exchange system in Miami installed right here in Vizcaya.
Wow.
The original phone booth?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. You know,
Everything
he
is
didn't want
balanced.
telephones to be sitting out on the
Progress.
tables in every room because that would destroy that illusion of age that they wanted for the house. So he had the phone tucked away in that little private room there. Again, you can see the coral rock used in the door frames.
This is all original. That's awesome. Here are some girls in here using the phone. I was tripping. Okay.
Telephone.
I just gotta get these figurines. Blah blah. Oh, there go my planters. Uh-oh.
Room where Mr. Deering would meet and socialize with his guests, and also where he liked to show off a lot of his art
That's
collection.
such a show off.
Mr. Chalfin used to refer to this room as the Renaissance Hall because many of the art objects came from that time period. Now I'd like to point out one of the rarest and most important objects that we have in our art collection here at Vizcaya, and that's that carpet that you see on the wall there. That carpet used to be on the floor here in this room. Now we have it mounted on the wall to preserve it. But that's known as the Admiral carpet, and it was made in Spain by Muslim weavers back in the 1400s, which makes it over 600 years old. And the reason why it's important is because it was actually made before the Spanish Inquisition, back at a time when the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews still all lived together in Spain. So you will see elements of those various faiths in the carpet. Now the carpet was commissioned by the grandfather of King Ferdinand of Spain. You remember King Ferdinand, right? He was married to Queen Isabella. And what were they famous for? They were the patrons.
Thank you for saving us, Mary.
Right. They were the patrons of Christopher Columbus. In fact, someone told me that there's a possibility that Christopher Columbus himself might have actually walked on that carpet when it was there in the king's home. Now, behind me over here, we have a Welty Philharmonic pipe organ. Pipe organs were kind of a status symbol that a lot of wealthy people would put in their homes, you know. Mr. Deering didn't play the organ. However, this organ was actually made so that it could play automatically using paper rolls, like a player piano. Now, above the organ, you see an oil painting. It's actually from the 17th century. It's an oil painting of the Holy Family. And they wanted to mount it on the doors above the organ. So what did they do to the painting?
They put it in half.
They cut it in half. Can you imagine? They took this valuable 17th century oil painting and they just unceremoniously cut it right in half so they could mount it on the doors. And then they would open those doors when they played the organ. There's over 2,000 pipes that are in the wall behind that organ. So,
Wow.
and then that frame around the painting is actually an altarpiece from a church.
What is the scroll?
Way up at the top, yeah, there's a scroll up there.
Good
It's
question.
actually a sign that in Greek, it's translated to mean a conqueror, I like conquer. Why they chose that, I'm
A
not sure.
conqueror what? A conqueror what now?
I like conquer.
Oh, okay.
Now, one other interesting thing over on this side is the fireplace. Now, that fireplace came from a French chateau. It's made out of French limestone, and they say it was one of Mr. Deering's most expensive acquisitions. He spent about $12,900 for that fireplace. However, when they brought it here, they actually changed it. They added something to it in order so that it would better fit here in the living room. Can you tell what they added to the fireplace?
The very top
The
part?
very top. If you look at that top tier where those two statues are, you can see that that top tier has a little different coloring than the rest. And
Yeah.
it also has a different style as well from the rest of the fireplace. Well, that top tier is made of plaster and it was designed by Paul Chalfin. I guess he didn't feel like the original fireplace was tall enough or impressive enough for this.
He was
for this
very
room,
flamboyant.
So they added that on the top.
What's in the box?
I don't think there's anything in there.
You think there was something in there?
Not sure about that. One other interesting thing I like to mention in this room, and that's these two armchairs here on either side of this table. They're gold with reddish colors. Those back in 1987, Pope John Paul II came to Miami to
I
say a
remember him.
mass. I actually attended that mass.
Wow.
And while the Pope was here, President Ronald Reagan wanted to meet with the Pope. So
I bet he
President
did.
Reagan flew down to Miami and he met with Pope John Paul II right here in Vizcaya. And
Cool.
they actually sat in those two chairs during that meeting.
How lovely.
And I believe that since then, Pope John Paul II has been declared a saint. So we actually had a saint sitting in one of those
We're in the
chairs.
saintly
What's
room.
the story of the ceiling?
Well, the ceiling actually is modeled after Renaissance ceilings in Florence, Italy, and by the way, it is made of plaster,
Get out.
not wood.
Really?
Made it look like wood,
They
yeah.
can make plaster look like anything.
And by
That's
the way, you
crazy.
can see some of the stains up there in the plaster. You can see those are the signs of some of the
Water damage.
mildew and that we get here because of the high humidity. So again, in this room you can see how these European objects and styles were brought here. And you know, Mr. Deering loved explorers. You know, I think maybe that's what attracted him to the carpet because of the connection with Columbus. And he loved the Age of Explorer, and he loved the ships and everything that the explorers used, but what Mr. Deering did is kind of the opposite of what the explorers did, right? Because they came here to America and then they brought things back to Europe.
He
right?
went to Europe and brought things back.
So he sort of did the opposite.
Question. Right under here, is that a dragon on that black square?
In the fireplace?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like it.
It looks like a
Actually, not too sure.
It is.
It looks
Yeah.
like it could be, yeah, I don't really know too much about the.
It
about
does
the-
look
It is a dragon.
A lot of detail.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big sea creature. And
Yeah.
there's a big sea on the left-hand corner.
A lot of detail.
Now, if you take a look in this hallway, if you look at the ceiling in this hallway, you'll see the second of the 3 antique ceilings that were purchased in Europe and then were brought here to Vizcaya. And by the way, up in this corner of the house is Mr. Deering's private bedroom suite. And then this is his private elevator that he would use to come downstairs from his bedroom to the first floor. And it also goes down into the basement below us. And right underneath the living room and going outside, Mr. Deering actually built an indoor-outdoor swimming pool.
Yeah, buddy.
So he could take the elevator right down to the basement when he wanted to go for a swim.
Oh,
This looks like the same that was in that window. Remember that window that we saw?
Oh, the stain.
You'll see that
Yeah, that's
repeated.
right.
The
Yes,
ship.
the ship,
Yeah.
you'll see it repeated.
You're gonna see a lot of ships around, and I'll tell you about those in a
And
minute.
the fountain in the
The Columbus
courtyard,
ship,
and then
and that goes
Yeah.
right
That's
on.
right.
around,
Yeah.
you'll see the ship.
Watch your step coming down the stairs here.
The doors.
Everything.
Look at the frickin' doors.
That's weird. Okay.
This room was originally furnished in wicker furniture that had big cushions on it and pillows, and so this would have been like a very comfortable outdoor living room where Mr. Deering could sit and have a drink and talk with his guests and enjoy the beautiful view of the water. Now, did anybody tell me what that body of water is outside?
Biscayne Bay.
That's Biscayne Bay, right? Now, Biscayne